allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
During our moment of silence tonight, we would like to remember Mr. Swain, one of our teachers from Thurman Francis Arts Academy. His son has been in a very bad car wreck. So during our moment of silence, could we please remember that family? Thank you. Thank you. We'll start with the agenda. Looking at our agenda, does anyone have any questions or comments? Anything that needs to be moved? Thank you. Looking at the consent agenda, does anyone have any questions, comments? Anything need to be moved, Dr. Sullivan?
Madam Chairman, I just call to attention of tab 1.6. We've talked about this previous years, so the county recreation runs county rec basketball through Eagleville Junior Pro. So I want you to be able just to see there are a large number of names that are not attached to this that are on tab 1.6, but that is a common approval every single year.
Okay. Anyone else? We will have Rutherford Proud on Thursday night.
Correct.
And we will now do number 8.
So RSP, Rob, I know Rob Schwartz is here with us presenting an updated zoning map based on parent and principal input. So Rob, I will turn it over to you. I know that's why most people are here, most people are watching. And so take us away.
All right, great. Thank you this evening for the time I get to have with you. I did want to at least say thank you to some of the staff members. This has been about 18 months, and I've spent quite a bit of time with Trey, James, Kay, and of course Dr. Sullivan, and it's been great trying to take the things that we've been able to learn as a third party, not living here, and applying those things that we learned from the data and those things that we learned from administration and definitely from the community. So I wanted to publicly thank them for making this a really wonderful process. It was backwards. I was going left to right. All right, so a little bit for those that are listening in, obviously we started this process a while back. We are doing a lot of redistricting work, so we consider ourselves experts in trying to understand what does the community want. And I think when we started out in this process, we talked about there was not going to be a perfect plan. And I think tonight, this is not a perfect plan, but it's a plan that as you look at what we're having to achieve through some of the challenges with where buildings are, where students are, how that matches up with developments and demographics, this is the best plan that we could achieve all those particular items. The reason that we're here with the redistricting is our enrollment continues to increase. It sounds like my audio's cutting in and out.
He's going to.
All right, awesome.
Yep.
So the key thing is, as you've heard many times from Dr. Sullivan, our enrollment continues to increase on an average of a little over 1,000 students a year. So we continue to increase. We have facilities that have been challenged with overutilization with portables, right? I'm restating so many things that we've talked about over the last 18 months. We are trying to plan for new additions at your high schools, a new elementary, and a new middle school. So all that's kind of put into this process with, I think, an end goal of trying to be future thinking in how these buildings can be used for students, so we're not having to do this so often. It's literally more focused in areas where we see growth. That's the intent. If you remember, when we did your enrollment analysis, we did an update this year with trying to understand how things were related to what was happening with development, how fast some of them were changing, or maybe decreasing in their change, whether it was single family or multifamily. So I just again remind you of, it is a statistical forecast model. It's data that's trying to help us understand what the future may mean. So as interest rates have increased, what has that meant for the absorption of housing? So everything's boiled down to a planning area. So the foundation of how we create those attendance zones. And then our forecast, we're still indicating, as we look backward in time with this visual, we've been growing from 1.3 to almost 5% each year. This last year was one of our lower rates of growth over the last 5 years, but we're still increasing. One thing that I remember, that I always want to tell everyone, it's harder to maintain a percentage increase as you get larger, because as the number gets larger, in order to maintain that percentage, you have to grow by a greater percentage.
And I'd also like to remind the board that we actually did a really hard line on making sure the students were attending our buildings were Rutherford County residents or students that had a reason to be here. So that is definitely part of the reason. I'd estimate we lost several hundred students that were attending our schools that should not have been attending our schools.
Excellent, excellent point. So again, we looked at live births, and you can see it's still trending for the most part upward, which means we should have more kindergartners 5 years later. We also looked at a re-examination of the migration. So the green part of those bars, those are students that were receiving services the previous year of the 4 years that we're showing. They're no longer here. The orange part of the bar are new students of the previous year. They weren't here, now they are here. When you look at that net gain this year of over 2,000 students, we continue to see there's people moving into the community, there's people choosing the services that we have to offer each of these students. We did a check on what was happening with population, the building trend, and what that meant for our enrollments. And so we've seen, when we look at the certificate of occupancies, we can see that it's gone up a little bit. In some of the places that we're working, it's actually gone down in the last year. So it's still really hot, and you guys know that as you drive around. We updated our growth area map from conversations that we had at the public inputs, more tours that we did while we were here during those public inputs, and more conversations with the city to understand how some of these developments are changing. This is always changing. This is one of those products you want to annually update because it's going to impact where we see kids. So what that meant as we looked forward for the next 5 years is enrollment growth, where we're growing towards 54,000 students district-wide. And this is just K-12, doesn't include early childhood. So again, growing. Some of our challenges are capacity without having some of the capacity challenges without factoring in the new building and the additions. We re-examined where we were seeing students, and we associated those maps to your existing attendance areas. So you'll have one for your elementary, what that then looks like for where we are dealing with capacity issues if we did not change boundaries. And so where I circled each of those buildings, those are the ones where that red dotted line is below the number of students that reside in that area, meaning we got to change the boundary to get them within the capacity. We do the same thing for your middle school. You can see the same challenges that we have as we get out to 28, 29, 93% utilization for all of our middle school buildings. We get to the high school, same visual, where the students are, how does that relate to the existing high school boundaries? And then basically almost all the high school boundaries have capacity issues. And that's because when we get out to 28, 29, we have more than 100% utilization of our buildings district-wide at the high school level. This is why we're planning for the next high school building, even though that's not in this plan that we're creating for you tonight. If you remember, we did a very intensive examination of your capacity to give you a functional capacity. This is why we have 3 columns up here. We have a functional capacity without portables, so that's the WO portable column, and then we have a functional capacity with the portables. As you know, we can't eliminate the portables. That's an impossibility. So we had to plan with the ideal is to get to that brick and mortar, but we will not be able to achieve that. You see that for each of the grade bands of elementary, middle school, and high school. So this gets us into our rezoning process. So again, we started this back in May of this year for the rezoning piece, and we've had some leadership team meetings. And we've had actually more than what we've put up there, because we've had a lot of impromptus. As you, the board, you've asked different questions. We will try to look, is there a way that we can try to make the plan better than what we showed in the public inputs? And it's a struggle. And I'll kind of walk you through some of the realities that we have and why you see what you're seeing this evening at each of those levels. So that brings us to tonight, where we're presenting what that recommended plan is. If you remember back at a past board meeting, we asked each of you to give us your top 4 criteria that you felt should guide us in the metric of understanding which plan might be better. And the prioritization that you gave with that was, we wanted to have projected enrollment, building utilization out front. Makes sense, right? Match the capacity with the number of students that can fit in the building. We wanted to have the boundaries last as long as possible. That's duration of boundaries. The third was keeping neighborhoods intact as we identified them back to that planning area, which is tied to the legal descriptions, everything that's at the county. So trying to keep those neighborhoods associated where you go to 1 elementary, 1 middle school, 1 high school. We then had demographic considerations to try to have some sort of balance with some of the socioeconomics, specifically as we looked at free and reduced lunch, ethnicity, all of those variables, to even include single-family and multifamily housing. And then we had a 5th kind of outlier with a tie, I believe, was trying to have something that would be a complete feeder. So the elementary will go to the middle school, and the high school, that's a fail. We can't do that. We tried to maintain some of it where if you get to the middle school that you would continue on into the high school. Again, we can't do it everywhere. So I'm just a challenge with where we have space and where the kids are. And even though we don't have transportation up there, that was a huge conversation at the public inputs and what we saw with the input that came back from the public. So we had many different challenges in this process. No spill?
That would have been another challenge.
That would have been technology. Keep my hands above. So some of the challenges that we had, I'm not going to read all of these bullet points, but what I thought was really interesting that we were trying to accomplish was the 3rd bullet point with Roy Waldron Annex being able to be used for some other programming needs. And so that's kind of integrated into this, and that's something a little bit different than what we initially started out on, but I think we're able to achieve that with some of the other programming needs. We're planning for the middle school opening in 26-27, the additions to the 3 high schools in 25-26. So a lot of things, also the elementary opening in 25-26 as well. So a lot of really cool things with adding capacity, adding opportunities for students to have different experiences in each of the buildings. New buildings, additions, but then what that means in the existing inventory. And I think sometimes when we go through the redistricting process, we lose sight of the existing buildings, and as we get them to a more manageable number of kids, it allows the programming to excel at a level that the building was designed for. So that's one of the things that's kind of in the layers of this.
Hey, Rob, can you go back and hit that main takeaway? Because I think it's good for the public and then our funding body to be aware of, that when it comes down to our main takeaway, this is not a long-term solution unless we get more buildings. And that's been something that's been mentioned quite a bit in the public. Our school system does not approve any type of developments, apartments, housing, that's out of our jurisdiction. The other thing that's out of our jurisdiction is funding for buildings. And so our school system, we would love to build buildings everywhere we can, but we don't have a funding ability to do that. And so I just wanted to point out that main takeaway, unless we get some help, we won't be able to build the buildings we need to.
Correct. Huge main takeaway. More work is to be done. So if we quickly talk a little bit about the public input. So quite remarkable, a little over 1,400 people responded. And you can see the breakdown in these visuals of where they showed their support at each of the zones. So kind of in the middle, but there was a little more support at the elementary for concept 1 and a little bit more when we got to the middle school and the high school towards concept 2. So kind of split. I think it really depended on the lens you were looking from. If all of a sudden now you had to drive farther, or maybe you had multiple kids in your household and now you're kind of going some different directions, it was hard. We typically see this in boundary processes where there's the needed change that we're talking about, and it's a challenge. We would love it to be where it would have been like 90% one way, but it rarely ends up being that way. We then factored in some of the staff input results and their desire with the concepts at each of the levels was for concept 1, was a greater number of them like concept 1.
This was our principal meeting, correct, when you say staff input?
Correct. So
the least amount of support was in concept 2, but the high school level saw the most support for concept 2. So that's kind of confusing. So to say that it was majority to be all in concept 1 when it was just for the middle and elementary, but not for the high school.
yeah, you're talking about with the public input.
So I think what I'm trying to say is that there was support for concept 1 for the elementary and the middle, but not for the high school.
Yeah, and I think we edited maybe between what you have and what we have up here because.
Okay, well, this is what I got today.
Yeah, and I think
this is what is printed. This is what was printed.
and I think we edited that because we had some confusion.
So of the three, I'll hit that. Of the 3 levels, concept 2 had the most support at the high school. So it still didn't have more support than concept 1. It just had more support than middle and elementary did.
Correct.
No, it was not concept 2. It had more support for concept 2 at the high school level, but not overall. So when you're looking at that, you only had 10 people at the high school level support concept 2, and 8 supported it at the middle and 6 supported it. 23 still supported concept 1 more.
Yeah, it's focusing on that band of whether it's concept 1 or concept 2. So it's the 6, 8, 10. And so it's a confusing bullet point where we were trying to illustrate that for concept 1, the people that were voting for concept 1, they had more support at the high school than they did at the middle and elementary. But overall, concept 2 got more votes from the public, from the principals. Or yeah, concept 1. Sorry, I said reversed it.
We lost it.
Was it divided amongst the elementary principals that voted for concept 1 more than concept 2, and high school teachers voted for concept 2?
Because that would also change that as well.
Potentially, we did not break out whether in this survey, I don't think we asked if they were elementary, middle school, or high school. It was just who was here and which do you support at the elementary, which do you support at the middle school and high school. So it could be exactly what you're saying, that there might be other people voting a particular way based on how this was impacting them.
And same thing with high school.
And
If
that's-
you're a high school teacher, you probably will support the one that you will benefit your area. I would say that basis.
It's not teachers.
You're So it's just everyone all together?
This is principals.
Principals, sorry, my fault.
Yeah,
The
it wasn't
principals,
teachers.
so sorry. I think the principals, whether they're in elementary, middle, and high school, that will play out in what the level of support is from one concept to the other. Because if you're in high school, you're going to be drawn more towards the high school one than you are in the middle and elementary school. Vice versa with the principals in elementary school and middle school, because you're really more focused in your area than you are in the other areas. So it'd be interesting to see within that pool of applicants broken down by the school type.
I don't think we broke it out that way in the survey. We just were like, you're here, what do you
We
think?
did by
Ballot
areas.
point.
We did by zoned areas, is how we put them together.
Can I ask you, I'm so sorry, but to back up to the graph before that one, just to clear up so we don't continue to have the main takeaways there. I think the middle one, when I'm looking at the graph, unless I'm misunderstanding this one, is wrong. I think it's supposed to say that concept 1 received more support at the elementary level and concept 2 received most support at middle and high school. Is that correct, or am I not understanding the graph?
You are correct.
Okay.
You are correct.
I just wanted to correct that before we created more confusion. I'm sorry.
It's one of those visuals when you look at the left to down with the red to the blue, and then you look and it's blue to red.
Yes, I agree.
It's not the best visual. We will agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question, Madam Chair. This 36 on the results overview for the staff, how was that 36 selected?
It was all principals were here. So we did a principals meeting on,
All principals, because we got 50-something principals,
a lot of our choice schools chose not to participate because it didn't impact them. So every group had a option. We did group feedback, and then they had a survey to turn in by Friday to Rob. We didn't run it to where they would submit feedback to him. So a lot of our choice schools didn't participate.
Good questions. Good questions. We'll make changes on that one page for sure. So really what we wanted you to take from the survey information is there was a lot of feedback, and it's really kind of split, whether it's 47, 53, it's pretty much down the middle, and I think it gets to some of the director comments of how it maybe impacted you, right? If you were more focused on the elementary, you maybe voted something different with the middle school and high school. I think that's a common theme that we see with how anybody responds to it is how does it impact your family, your kids, your neighborhood for some of these things. But we at least got public input. 1,400 persons took the time to give us some sort of feedback. All right, so I'm not going to read all of these bullet points. I think what I want to do is I'm going to go to the high school map with the recommended, and I'm going to kind of work backward from what's in my presentation because I want to take the smaller pieces that are larger, right? So at the high school, so we have fewer pieces to work here. So some of the challenges that we innately had are a result of how we're trying to add capacity at the high school level. So as we put more seats at Oakland and Riverdale, we need more kids there, right? And right now, those are buildings. How do we get kids to those buildings as it relates to their proximity to other buildings that are close by? So whether it's Siegel, Rockvale, Blackman, how do we move into those areas? How do we address the way things have historically been in the city schools boundaries as those kids come into our middle school and our high school? These are all relevant challenges that we had with the data, with where buildings were located. The other thing so we're trying to pull generally from the west to the east. We're talking about the high school. And we have extreme challenges up at Laverne High School. In fact, as we look at what's happening with what I would call the choices of students where it's full and where they go, that's one of the buildings where I would coin it as almost like enrollment capping, where, gosh, it's so full there, we want to go to a different building, so where do you go to the next building? And so there's a lot of things happening at play with the choices with how full a building is. And so that in itself was one of the obstacles that our team tried to overcome with the data. Is we can only push things so far before all of a sudden now you're literally driving by the building to get to another building. And that's kind of one of those redistricting elements that we try to minimize if at all possible. We heard a lot of conversations at the public input about specific buildings. And so I know my team, Jenna and myself, we would go out the next day, particularly day 2 and day 3. We'd go to some of these places and we would look at, hey, when it's starting or ending of the day, what's it like? And when you guys drive these roads, it's challenging at some points. I mean, you could be on one road when it's school beginning or getting out, and it's like a zoo. Go there an hour later, and it's, wow, I can take a left-hand turn here, and there's not that big a deal. So those were kind of elements that I think as we look at where our buildings are located, how we needed to move students to be able to get at all of the things that you were wanting us to look at with the prioritization of the boundary criteria and with the reality of some of the things that are happening in your community with the new developments and whatnot. So this is the visual that I have, and I know we're going to have some questions, but I wanted to at least take the map and say, here's how some things started to undulate. I want to take a little more time on some description here where we know there's been some places that have had more moves here recently than others, and specifically in the area that's in Blackman that juts down into Rockville. So one of the challenges we have is we didn't want to just keep disrupting an area, and so one of the references that's sometimes made is you kind of like ping pong between buildings because you may be in a place where as there is capacity or as where there's students, we need you to go over here now so we have this new building, so now you have to come over here. So as we started to look at some of the realities of your community in order to make changes where Blackman could extend up north in that pie piece there along Murfreesboro Road, we'd have to move something out of Blackman to get capacity. So it was how do you start to move some of these pieces to get at the right capacity in the buildings? We had lots of conversation about the city core and how we have some traditions of where kids go and how that may make sense to try to maintain that as much as possible and not have what we had in the initial concepts where it was broken with just like 2 buildings that would absorb all that maybe there needs to be a reason to balance out some of the demographics that we have in a specific place amongst many buildings. That's kind of at the high school. Then as we started to move into the middle school, we really, even though it was lower on our prioritization, we wanted to focus on a feeder because every school district that we work in, one of the things we hear from parents is they ideally want to know not only what school they go to, but as you make the friendships at whatever grade band, whether it's elementary, middle school, or on into high school, you want some sort of continuity. Right? It makes sense with your teams, your friends, and that's where we had to baseline where we couldn't get that. When you just look at the numbers and you say, here's the high school capacity, here's what that means if we have 4 grades there, how many middle schools feed into the high school. We tried to work that math forwards, backwards, reverse, everything, and you just can't get the right capacities from middle school to high school to have a complete feeder. So we started to look at some of the things with transportation. One of the themes that we had was with buildings that were on the campuses, trying to get it where as we looked at when students start, that we could get families going in the same direction to those buildings, and there would be continuity because those buildings are in the same locations and we don't have the crossing of transportation. Didn't always work. There's still going to be some of that crossing with the number of kids and where the buildings are. So we tried to really hone in on that to try to get as much of a complete feeder from middle school to high school. We also tried to look at it even a little bit differently. Is there a way that we could get the elementary boundaries where you could completely feed into the high school? So again, saying, hey, you may part ways in your relationships and your experiences at the middle school, but you're going to reunite at the high school. Again, not the best situation if you are for a complete feeder, but those are some of the themes that we really didn't say too much I don't think in the public inputs, but those are innately things that my team is trying to look at, because the last thing we want is this disruption where kids are going in so many different directions, which then gets us at the elementary zones. And another point is when we have the new elementary and we have the new middle school coming online there on the west side, trying to plan for, hey, you're right around that building, you're going to go here. There were places where we were like, gosh, if this building was a little bit more this way or this way, we could get something where we would be able to get a more complete feeder. We just can't do that. And so it's just, again, logistically where buildings are, where kids are, developments, all of that interesting stuff. So that's kind of just in general the breakdown of why you visually see what you see and how we try to address all of the elements that came in, whether it was public inputs, the executive leadership team, or you as a board. We just couldn't fulfill all of them. We tried our darndest to make things, but then it was almost like, hey, you make this change, and it was a huge domino effect where all of a sudden everything that we were trying to do to pull from the northwest down into the southeast, it just unravels all of it. So what does
Rob,
this
can you bring up one thing? Because I think some of the comments that we received were basically we presented concept 1 and 2, and then you have a new concept. And so can you talk about the evolution? I think from the beginning we talked about concept 1 and 2 were definitely starting points, and they were not going to be the final products. But I understand there are some areas that were not part of that original plan, so then they feel, I didn't fill out the public comment because it didn't involve me. And so can you talk to some of that evolution a little bit?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to day one that we heard from Dr. Sullivan, we heard from you as a board. This was going to be a comprehensive process, and as we learn different things in the community of maybe where there's different dangerous intersections and how it's a challenge to go one way or the other, or as we're looking at the balance of students that would be in the building, what are their needs, and do we have the right spaces in those buildings as we bring those different type of students into those spaces. And so we always kept going back to those prioritized boundary criteria and saying, okay, if we're going to make a change, does this get at better balancing the enrollments? Does it get better at trying to create a longer lasting, right, air quotes, if we're growing by 1,000 students a year, we need more space, and we're going to need other spaces beyond just that elementary and middle school. We need to strategically plan for that high school, right? So trying to get it where what changes we make sets us up for, as the growth continues, that we can bring online other buildings and we don't have to do a comprehensive change. So for instance, in the Northwest with the next high school, we have several locations that are possible locations where we build that building. We're already trying to strategize, well, what does that mean with what we're talking about in this recommended concept? Does this start to roll back something? And then we get to the reality, when do we actually build the high school? And so that was something where, as we were talking about high school, how much change can we make? And initially we're like, well, if there's going to be another high school, can we wait? Well, we can't wait up on the northwest side. We got to find some relief because we're looking at 2029 at the earliest.
2028, 2029 is the earliest the county commission would be able to fund and build a building.
And so that's a long time, right? That's at least 1.5 generations of high schoolers that are going through the system that would be in an overcrowded system. Now I say that, remember I said at the high school level, because this gets into that iteration of we're going to be over 100% utilization district-wide at the high school. So whatever we do, doesn't matter how I carve it up, all of the buildings, if we uniformly carved it up, all of the buildings would be over. So we started to say, where is it not, I mean, it's not ideal above 100%, but we're going to be above 100%, but we for sure didn't want to see something where we're looking at 110%, because that's a similar situation that we're seeing in a couple of our buildings, and it's not good. I think that hits
It is, yeah.
some of those iterations. So I think really what we're trying to show you is it was definitely a evolution to try to respond to what the community may want to see. And some things we just can't do because we have to move kids out of some of these buildings. They just can't stay there because we don't have space.
because I go back to, Rob, when we get to like concept 2, I know that was preferred at the high school level. But when we go back to concept 2 and I start looking at the enrollment numbers, you're looking at Blackman High at 2935, Laverne High 2994, Stubart's Creek 2883. To get below that, unfortunately, we have to move people to where we have seats. And I would much rather not recommend that we move students, but I also don't recommend having a high school at 3,000.
That's correct.
I agree with that, but what I've been hearing is this, is that there were 2 concept maps that were presented. And what parents were looking at and what the administration was looking at was 2 totally different things. Parents were looking at the boundary of where they impacted the neighborhood. The administration is looking at the enrollment numbers of what that boundary lines look like. And so when these 2 concept maps were presented, they were not presented to say, look at both of for the parents to understand, to look at both, because where they're just looking at one. And obviously, we were able to get the numbers a little bit more favorable because we ended up getting this evolution map. So my question is, why did we not start with a map that conveyed that to me, that showed that at the same time, where the boundary lines and enrollment numbers were a little bit more favorable, because now what parents were looking at were just looking at the boundary lines. Why there was not a concept presented with that a little bit more aligned instead of being a lot more of a gap between what the boundary is and what the enrollments were going to be? I think that's a question I've been wanting to understand, and I was going to ask you it in the most polite way.
Yeah, and that's fine. Everyone's polite in Tennessee. Here's what happened. We had the public input. We took those 2 concepts, and as we looked at them, there were some pros and cons to each of them, right? And so as we started to blend them together to get you a recommended concept, things evolved where you see the progression of what we have for elementary, middle school, and high school. Then as you all received what that high school boundary was, the response was, there's a little more that we want to see differently, specifically with Blackman. And so our team went back, is there a way that we can start positioning some things that maybe were a little bit different? Because one of the things we heard specifically with Oakland was we wanted to come up and get off of Pikes. We wanted to get some of those students to create a balance of what the student makeup would be in Oakland. Well, in order to do that, we shift a little bit south in the alternative, right? Which then creates some challenges with Riverdale, because we're putting some additions on there. So again, it's this ebb and flow, and it never was intended that you get a plan and the public sees this and it was voting, I'm voting for 1 or 2. It was, as you're looking at these 2, we relied on the comment section of how are some of these things going to impact you as a parent, as you're moving your kids to each of these buildings. And then as we visually looked at that, how do we use the metrics to create something that will match ultimately the number of kids that are going to be in each of these buildings?
Right, and I understand that. That makes sense. It's very logical. However, I think I'll go back to the same question as I wasn't part of the conversations that was said with the central office with you, so I don't know. And I haven't talked to Dr. Sullivan, so I have to make that clear. I haven't spoken with him. But how was it decided to bring the concept max, I will be honest, with the worst case scenario, with the numbers of our enrollment so high, but yet we were able to come to a concept map where the numbers were pretty level? Where was the conversation to say, we would like to look at concept maps where we start with the levels to be a little bit more level, because that will get us more where we're going to end up going anyways. Because with this the other one gave a little bit sense that we were heading based upon boundary lines, not necessarily changing things to accommodate enrollment numbers. I hope I'm explaining myself correctly.
You are, and I don't think there's any answer I can give that's going to fulfill where you're going to feel comfortable that you have an alternative plan. Beyond me saying that this is kind of the evolution. When you get to the point where a decision needs to be made, there's some other things that may come into focus that gels it a little bit differently. And I think that's why you see this alternative high school plan, and I give that credit to you as a board and to the leadership team to say, hey, is there maybe another way that we can kind of to look at this particular core area and maneuver it in a way that it gets the balance that you're seeing with those numbers. And so I feel good about how that conversation evolved to get us to the point where we're talking about that, and you literally have that ability to say, I like the alternative plan, which may be your case, over what the actual initial recommendation of the high school plan is.
Well, we've had to have some changes to it, and one of the changes to it wasn't there, and I had marked it. I think it's over here, but it's in the Blackman area, and it's no secret. I mean, what I'm about to say. But there was some conversation around when the concept 1 was shown, and the concerns about from the parents' input, and even what was going to be be a recommendation, but ended up not being a part of it. So one of the concerns for the themes in the high school, for the Siegel High School zone, was concept 1 creates a traffic nightmare for students to the west of Northwest Broad to get to Siegel High. Concept 1 sends to Siegel. Impossible left turn onto Medical Center from Asbury. High school zone is too big. Nobody southwest of Broad should be zoned to Siegel. Traffic and trains will be issued. That was the parent input. And then the recommendation was high school, consider moving one of the areas north of I-24 back to Blackman High School to improve transportation to Siegel. And that kind of did happen, but the area that got moved is the closest to Siegel, but then the area that's farthest away to Siegel got moved to Siegel. So there was just some disconnect. And the thing is that when the new concept came in, there was, again, the issues came up about logistics and transportation. And now there's a concept map that is being accommodated for that. So there's been some accommodating, but not all accommodating on that.
I'll hit on that, Rob.
Transportation side.
So the accommodation goes because of open seats. So any area in any zone map can be moved, but in order to move it, you're going to have to give up other areas. And so this exact conversation we're having, I know you're talking about the Florence Road area, and I would love to leave that off Blackman. It comes down Florence Road, Blackman Road. But to do that, you're going to have to move other areas right around Blackman. They're then going to have to go to Rockville. Then Rockville areas are going to have to go to Riverdale. So you can pick and choose any neighborhood and pick any neighborhood, but somebody has to move from Blackman because there are too many students there. We were able to accommodate one part of I-24 north of that to be able to go back. The reason that one was chosen is just for this year. So I'm going to read the number of kids in that area. 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th as of today. You have 53 9th graders, 43 10th graders, 44 11th graders, 46. The area off Florence Road has 84 9th graders, 97 10th graders, 99 11th graders, and 92. And so it truly came down to the board's number one priority was number of seats, and that's what we were trying to do. The board can do as they wish and put more portables at Blackman. I don't recommend that, but if that's something the board chooses to do, you absolutely can. That's the only way we can fit that many students at Blackman is to purchase a dozen or more portables.
Well, I mean, I'm just going by what the public input said and then what the recommendation, and given that we are making accommodations for transportation in other areas as well. I know I'm just one vote, but I'm just sharing my concerns.
Madam Chair. The additions for the high school, are they included in these plans?
Correct, for the capacity change.
All additions, Laverne, Blackman additions included in that?
No, Riverdale, Oakland, and Smyrna.
Okay, so here we got in our 5-year building plan that we're going to be adding some more additions. So if we add those additions, I think they need to be considered here. If we're going to consider a new elementary school, a new middle school, we should be considering also the alternative of having additional add-ons at Laverne and Blackman.
I will say the board retreat, we all discussed Blackman High School, and it wasn't brought up to include that. I know the board hasn't officially voted on that to bring forth, but
it's in the plan. That's the problem.
I know we're looking at a high school, and obviously, it's very clear we need a high school. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I will say that since I've sat in this seat, I have been a huge vocal proponent of buying land so we can build. I've gotten murdered on Facebook over the decision of buying the Beatty property because of this sticker price. But the reality and the truth is that we need land, we've got to build, and this really proves we have to buy land. I mean, there's this whole rezoning thing. I think the reason why I feel that I'm a little frustrated, and I'm just not the only one, is because this area keeps rezoned every 2 years over and over and over and over again. And now we're going in, this is the 4th time, and if we do get a high school, we're gonna be rezoned again. So it's clear, obvious, that this side of town needs a high school.
What's created this disaster is fast growth.
Yeah.
Too much fast growth going on in this county. And then Blackman, if you just look at the heat map and see where all the development's going on, and this board has no control over what gets built in this county.
Exactly.
But you got Laverne, Smyrna, Murfreesboro approving all these apartments, all these houses, and then here we are trying to figure this disaster out. How are we gonna get kids in the schools?
Mr. Young, that hits a good point. So I got asked on the radio this morning that said, so as a director of schools, you're the CEO of 51,000 students and 6,000 employees, and it just hit me. I said, you're correct. It has no control over funding it.
Right, we have no.
And so as a board, that's what we're authorized with governing it. We don't have control over funding.
But we are here trying to figure this mess out. And no matter how we do it, without the funding to build new schools and build them all at one time, we're never going to get out of this situation. We're going to always be in this situation right here that we're in. We've been rezoning and building schools for almost 12 years I've been on this board. We can do this plan now, and I guarantee you we're going to be in here rezoning again in 3 years. And the whole purpose of doing this was to try to come up with a plan that would last 4 or 5 years so we wouldn't have to rezone. But do you see a way of doing that? Do you see a plan for that we can go 4 or 5 years and not rezone?
I don't at the high school because we don't have capacity. We're limited at the middle school because we're close to 95% district-wide. I do think there's moves that are made in this plan that do situate and do allow us, when the new buildings do come online with the locations we're talking about, that you should not have to do a comprehensive zoning. It should be more targeted towards the areas where the new buildings are going to be located. And I think that's why I go back to the movement of students from the west to the east is corresponding with where we see the developments happening and trying to plan for, if those are stabilized with, again, showing that we have this capacity and these kids are there and it works, that allows more flexibility on the west side when the building opens, that we don't have to change these boundaries. Some of the realities, we can't change where the railroads are, we can't change the intersections. That's our challenge of how do we get this. And if you just, I've been trying to figure out how I can get a visual of this, like for your community, where as you see the students and the new buildings coming online, like we had to adapt, right? We needed the space, so you build this, and so, oh my gosh, I live in this area, and the closer you are to a building, the more likely you go to that building. And when we look at the attendance area for Blackman, we're in the issue where you do get ping pong because you're in a space where you're not close enough to the building, but we need you right now when the building opens, and then, oh, now you're growing so fast in this area, you open up the next building, oh, now we need you over there. And so it's an unfortunate circumstance of fast growth is there's just some areas in the district where you just get bounced, and it's like, how do you minimize that short of where in some areas we're saying, okay, you've just moved 2 years ago, we're trying to say, no, you don't move, or in this plan, it's looking out, the changes don't happen until 25, 26. So that gives some time to understand these changes, but no, you're right, we're going to be rezoning, but my hope is with the analytics and the way by which you approach this rezoning, we shouldn't have to do a comprehensive, it should be targeted.
Well, a lot of these areas continue to be ping pong, and it's not, this comprehensive plan truly is not overall a shared sacrifice. is there's still down, like in Eagleville, there's still seats that are open. And we didn't see the boundary lines move from Rockville to Eagleville. So, but like I said, I'm just sharing some of my concerns.
Yeah, so we did move some areas in from Rockville into Eagleville and some areas from Blackman into Eagleville. A challenge there is transportation, right? As we get out into those remote areas, my team, again, we drove out there and we're like, gosh, this is just a hard area as you get some of these places that get moved in, and we don't have a lot of capacity at Eagleville. That's the other challenge. So that kind of walks you through. I want to hit the numbers, because I think the numbers kind of start to drive some of the conversation. And I always like to look at the last column of 28, 29, and I look at the utilization of the building. So here on page 31, when we're looking at the elementary buildings, for the most part, there's just a few buildings that are above 90%. We tried to look, can we like move a little bit here or there to get it down closer to under 90%? It's just, again, that's a lot of change. How do we try to minimize? We can have this number of kids in there. The only building that we see that's really underutilized through this time period is Plainview. And again, that's great facility. It's time. It's time eventually we have it. We talked about is there another building down there that we repurpose and move those kids to Plainview for other things? So it wasn't just limited to some of the things that we're talking about. We were trying to address some of the other needs across the district at different grade bands. But here, for the most part, as we get to 28, 29, we should be under 100% utilized in all of the buildings. We do want to watch, I think it's Roy Waldron, where it's up there, and that's a lot because of what we're going to do with that other building. We get to the middle school and the high school here on page 32 with this initial recommended plan. Just looking at numbers, again, we still have 4 buildings at the middle school level that'll be overutilized, and you can see down at the high school, other than Siegel and Eagleville, and Stewart's Creek were right there. All the other buildings are over utilization.
Rob, can I ask you a question about the elementary school back on page 31? The Stewart's Creek Elementary on the 28-29, it's going to be at 95%. That capacity, that includes the portables that are currently there?
Yeah, I think the capacity that we're using is the functional portable capacity. So again, we just can't get around the portables. We ideally want even fewer kids there. Sure. Without the portables.
Thank you for the clarification.
Can I bring up one thing? So this was brought up by a principal today. It was a great point that we have to start talking about as a school board. These numbers include kindergarten through 12th grade. They do not include integrated or voluntary pre-K. And so we have over 1,000 students that we are serving in our elementary schools at integrated and voluntary pre-K. Some of that is required, some of that is not. I'm not against either of those programs, but when we are looking at these numbers, I need to give you all an update as well of how many programs we actually have at these buildings. When I was visiting John Coleman, and I'll say that was the one today, it was how many programs they actually have. They have several hundred students in voluntary and integrated pre-K that we're going to have to figure out something, or otherwise they can't take this many students. But that's something that the board, we don't need to look at the zoning map, but we have to have discussions about. I do like seeing green though, Rob. We haven't seen green much.
Only one building. But
Only one building, that's okay.
we do provide you the demographics breakdown, and the key thing here is there's a similar balance in the buildings from what they were before to what they are now. We really honed in on some of the free and reduced lunch, just more as a sense, not as the reason of how we make a change, but really understanding as the building is used, what are the supports that might be needed for students that would be in the lower socioeconomic. So not a reason for how we made our choices, and that's an important distinction, but something of how the building actually would operate. We focused more on the ethnicity and some of the housing product that was there.
Something I'd call out as well, that's the percentage and demographics for who actually resides in the zone. So that's been a lot of conversation as well. If these aren't the students that are actually attending my school, then we have to, as a school system, make sure that we are attracting all of our students into our schools as part of that competition portion, but also this is who resides in the zone, not who may attend. It's impossible to tell who's going to attend and who's not going to attend. For introduced lunch numbers, when we talk about that as well this year, it's going to be a little bit higher than this number because of the change with Medicare and Medicaid now counting as free and reduced lunch.
And I do want to also note on the free and reduced lunch, we had 3 years where nothing was done, right? You just showed up and you were able to get fed or you had transportation. Now, as they're filling out forms, we're seeing spikes in every district that we work with because we just didn't have people filling out forms.
So you're seeing that not just here, everywhere?
Right, everywhere, right? Because now they're filling out the form. We also historically have seen as you move through the grade bands, there's fewer kids that complete those forms. And I don't think I'm seeing anything yet that would reverse what we were seeing before COVID on that.
I have a question again about page 32, looking at the projections for the high schools, 28, 29. Are those based off the alternative high school concept, or is that based off concept number 3?
In this one, it's the recommended. I do have something that shows the alternative high school as well.
Are there significant changes in any of those numbers compared to the alternative? I know I'm maybe jumping ahead of you here.
That's a good question.
There's a little bit, but
It's a little. I'll make a note of that when we get to that point.
Sure.
I'll try to hide it.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, more of the demographics at the elementary. I think I showed that, and then with the secondary. Then the next iteration was with the students where we know they are now, how would they be impacted in 25, 26 with this plan? So again, where students reside, what attendance zone they should be attending based on where they reside. How does this start to play out with what that impact might be? As we get to the year before the building opens, this number goes up, right? Because right now there's kindergartners that aren't even in the system that are going to be impacted when this boundary change occurs. One thing that we always recommend with administration is sometimes when we have the boundary changes, they're later, another school year later. If there's space, you don't have a lot of space in some of these buildings, they may ask, can I just go ahead and go to that building starting out? That's something that you'll probably have to look at as you put this into implementation. But just what does this table show you? So on the left-hand side, it's based on where you would currently reside, what zone that would be in. And then as you move to the right, what building would that be that you would be attending? So that's why when we go down to that total SIBC of students, it's about 1,600 elementary students that are impacted by this boundary change when it goes into effect in 25, 26.
will you share that with us, because I don't think we have that one.
Yeah, we don't have that one. We don't have page 35. Slide 35.
Oh my gosh. You probably have more of a percentage?
We have
Yeah, we have the
percentage recommended.
35.
Okay, so I added that in. So that just gives you another thing that we were looking at that wasn't in the actual report that came to you all as a board. I think it may be in our appendix sheets and it got pulled up. This is just, again, to help you know how those students move through the system. Where are they getting assigned? This is key because when you approve whatever the boundary is, we know who those kids are. They can be notified. They can start the planning. They can start getting involved in the building that they would end up attending if they're one of those students. This might be the one that looks familiar that's in your reports. This one, what we're looking at here is how students are complete from the elementary to the high school. And so the percentages, if it's 100%, it completely goes from that elementary into the high school. Where we see percentages less than 100%, they're broken in the feeder from elementary to high school. So that elementary zone, I know they go to middle school, but thinking about geography-wise, that elementary, how does it fit into the high school? This is the breakdown. What's important about this is one of the things that we strive for in these changes is ideally to have everything double digits with growth or the difference between the buildings. So that way, as you create relationships, those relationships can be continued as you move into the different grade bands. There's some anomalies, like when we look at John Coleman, that 1%, and some of that is how we you get a piece, and to make something continuity or the transportation, that's probably the only piece that I would look on this that I'm like, gosh, there's 1%, that's not very many kids. Is there a way that maybe they have a special condition to stay in the situation they are because it's just a couple kids?
And we have this as page 36 and 37, so it's combined just as one slide on here.
Then here is showing the middle school to high school feeder. And so how the middle school feeds into the high school. Again, the same understanding of those percentages. When it's 100%, it's complete. And when it's less than 100%, that shows where the break in the feeder is and how many students get distributed between those buildings as you move from the left to the right.
I'm sorry, is this the elementary school to middle school?
Yeah, page 35.
I'm just clarifying, because he said middle school to high school, so I just want to
I
make
meant
sure.
say elementary, sorry. Read the main takeaway, Rob. Elementary to middle school. I'm wearing my glasses. All right, so here's
I
some
want to
of the
ask you, I'm
conclusions.
sorry, can I ask you a question, or just point out something here? Number 37, I think our 37 is this thing. Looking at middle school to high school feeder diagram. I just think it's interesting to note here that it looks like you guys have tried to do as much as you can feeding middle schools to high schools, trying to get them near 100%. But there's a lot of split up in here. That new middle school, it looks like it's going to be going to 4 different high schools. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is correct. And ideally, as we're looking at this, we're trying
Yeah.
max 3, ideally 2 if you splits. And it's, again, as you start to put all of these pieces, if you think of the chessboard of the elementary, the middle school, and high school, and you're trying to get some of those to fit with the limits and the capacity. And this is why one of your takeaways, not only is it, do you need new buildings, but it's as we think about, if the goal is to have complete feeders, how do we have the design of our middle schools and elementaries that they can feed into it? So as we do things that are seen as like a Band-Aid fix of, hey, we put an addition here, an addition there to solve, A, it costs more, but B, it then starts to create a situation where you may never be able to absolutely feed that elementary into a middle school. It's going to be broken. Or you're just going to say, we're going to have portables there to be able to address what those students are. So there's some other things that are some takeaways of why you start to see some splits where it might be 3 schools or, in this case, 4.
I don't think we're ever going to be able to make sure that feeder school just goes to that high school.
Probably right.
I just, not with the way the growth has been and just the way this county's going, there's no
The
way.
new middle school to the 4, because we need a high school.
We
That's
need-
what this all
this-
says. This
we need a high
says
school.
that on that side of town, we need a high school. This is all comes down and boils down.
But all
to.
those kids won't go to that one high school either.
They are not going to be split to Siegel, Smyrna, Soares Creek. There will be less schools that they're going to be going to. So
They
what
will be split.
This data, what it really reveals is that we need a high school. That's what this says, and it's been shared for a while, and this just proves it even more.
I'll say if you take the middle school out, you now have Rockville Middle and Blackman Middle even larger. So I don't think it's to say that we need the high school. You just can't get rid of
We need
both.
middle school, we need elementary school, but we also need, additional to the elementary school and middle school, we need a high school.
And we need them all tomorrow. We don't need to wait until 28, 29.
And to your point, how awesome would it be if we had funding in store and a timeline where the high school, what we would be presenting to you tonight
Totally different.
would be incredibly different. The challenges that you see with either of these plans probably would be better addressed, but until you have it, it's unfortunately the
You bring us a big
situation.
check?
I don't make that much money.
About 280,
They will take it.
280 million, Rob, 280 million.
I'll keep playing the lottery. I keep losing. Good questions that you have. So here on this last page, we tried to summarize what is happening and how that recommended concept starts to address. And again, forthright, all transparency, this is not a perfect plan. There is just going to be places, it just plain stinks with where we have to move kids. And it comes down to, if we could put more kids in those spaces, hey, let's just hold on. But I know you have toured the building just like I have, and there's some places it's just amazing what's happening there with how they're using spaces and how they're doing the programming. And you're at a point where some of these buildings, we have to change them. There's just no way around it. I think that the big things that I just kind of wanted to address is really the left-hand column, that bluish gray area of what we're trying to do. So the repurposing of the Roy Walden Annex and how that's going to be able to assist us in other areas, and how we try to provide relief to these campus schools as much as possible, which gets us to the alternative. Which in many ways is a lot nicer on some of the aspects, and I think it's worthy to go over. So the big differences was how we tried to spin things right here in the core between Siegel and Blackman, and trying to adjust things then as it goes to the east, knowing that by doing some of these changes, it does have some impacts of how much relief can we provide up towards Laverne and Smyrna. But I think one of the things that we talked about in the advantage of what you see with both of these high schools, and maybe a little bit more here, is it does start to target, with at least two of the sites that we're looking at, where would be a targeted high school change with what we see in this alternative high school. So there's no doubt about that. When we look at the numbers, and I'm going to come back to your questions, let me pull up what I have since I'm looking at alternative high school. So what are some of the things that changed in this with the projections?
And where I go into that, I'll bring up, we're able to make this modification because we have available seats on that side of town. If we had available seats in other places, we could make modifications. Otherwise, we just unfortunately don't have them.
And you can see this table is a little different because we also put in the other programs that pull the entire county in, right? So Central and McKee. So let me go down here as my eyes look. So as we look at Blackman High School, we're at 101%. I think my numbers are right. If I have this, it's pretty similar. As we go down to Laverne, it's higher. That's what I was saying, is like it goes up because we're not providing as much relief. But I think we've been seeing what happens with relief at Laverne is families are making choices to go to one of the other buildings, right? That's one big change. We're able to have Riverdale comes down because more of Oakland pushes down into Riverdale. That's where we had some conversations, really even at the public inputs. There was talk, let me go to the map, where we were wanting to take a lot of this area that you see in this alternative up to Oakland's. We were even looking then to bring more students to Riverdale. Do we go out to, like, let's say Veterans Parkway in the Rockville area and pull some of that into Riverdale? So I mean, there's still some more where if we really were wanting to pull or whatnot, you could change some of these numbers a little bit.
And Rob, if you'll go.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's going to get to Ms. Rosales' question. If you'll go back, there's room to pull more students into Riverdale from the Rockville-Blackman area. But at some point, you're going to get to where you continuously do public input, to where some neighborhoods always going to be mad, because we have to move because of seats. I hate it. My neighborhood's been rezoned 3 times because of Rockville and Riverdale in the last 4 years. And we're in one of those domino spots right off of 231, and it just continually happens. And trust me, my neighbors get frustrated with it too, and I wish I could solve it. I can't solve that.
We just rezoned back 2 years ago.
Yep.
A large portion, or most of the traditional Riverdale zone from Christiana, that had been sent to Rockville back. And let's just say not all parents thought it was the greatest thing. So,
Well, but too, if I may, Ms. Maxwell, they overzoned
yeah, they did. They overzoned.
Riverdale.
So we had to do it.
Overzoned Riverdale, and we overzoned Stewart's Creek High School.
Mm-hmm.
So they were overzoned when they opened. I'll have more
We need to
comments on
make
that.
sure we don't do that this time.
I'll have more comments on that.
Here's my question. So if we're taking seats out of Blackman to move them to Siegel, and in 2028, the capacity is 101%, but then Siegel is at 111%. And Siegel is not growing because of growth. Siegel just grew because we zoned from a zoned school to a new school to Siegel. So I don't understand that. And that's on page 40. On the it says new, there's 2.
Yeah, so there's some changes that happened to Siegel. So the areas that are west of 231 on Jefferson Pike, in the regular one that was proposed, that was coming from, instead of being at Siegel, was at Oakland, right? And so then the alternative, we moved them back into Siegel.
Right, but we are creating a problem, Siegel, and the reason why we moved them to Siegel is because of seats, but it's going to be overcrowded by 22.8, but yet Blackman will be 1-1, but it's not growing because it's a hot zone. It grew because we pulled kids from a hot zone to that area. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I think it goes back to if the board is interested, one of the things you guys asked RSP not to do is to split neighborhoods. If we want to go split neighborhoods, you can zone one side of the street to Blackman and one side of the street to Rockville and make it an even 105%. But that was something that board asked not to do.
I don't recommend that. The downtown got done that way for years, and it was not good.
But it's not a true representation of growth, what these numbers now are going to look. Because even though Siegel is going to be overcrowded, Siegel's a great school. I think the colors that they have, they're beautiful. But it's not growing because of growth. It's growing because we pull the kids from the growth to that. So when you're looking at the numbers and looking over capacity, it's not going to paint a true, clear picture of where the growth is happening. That's just the point I'm trying to make from moving all these kids around.
And Oakland's going to be the same way.
The most, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is what you said, the most immediate area of growth on the high school side is Laverne, is that correct?
That's one where we've been, historically, we have more kids significantly than capacity, and we're seeing a lot of those students go to other buildings because it is so full. But it's the one that's the most challenging to try to get capacity relief, because how do you get to these other high schools, right? It's a long distance.
And they just approved a neighborhood with 10,000 units.
I know.
And we've got 4 or 5 neighborhoods coming up. You go down Burton Knob, and you've got like 6 neighborhoods coming up. So that area on the 24 side is popping. I mean, it is still pretty hot. And it's not stopping anytime soon, and I drove just now back there.
the automobile property.
Field now. So there's going to be new
Should have looked at the
houses coming.
automobile property.
I don't know, I'm sure you pulled in, hopefully the permits were already submitted when we were doing that, and those numbers were taken into account, but there's a lot of subdivision coming in that area.
Concur. I totally concur with that. Again, this is where it comes down to is a building over 110% versus 108% or 105%. We're going to run into that because we can't evenly split where it is, knowing that our capacity will be over 100%, right? So which buildings are better suited to be at 110%? And I know that sounds like totally moronic to even say that, but that's the situation we're in. We need seats, and so there's some buildings that may be better suited for having more students beyond what their capacity is. And that's kind of where we tried to decide, trying to get everyone under 110% if you were going to be overutilized.
I do have a question on the Siegel capacity number. I'm just having a hard time believing that Siegel is at 2,049.
Agree. Yeah, we agree it's higher. I know that they cut some classrooms off because of construction. Do you remember, Trey? 2,049 for Siegel seems low for me for that building, but I know it also had to get an addition to bring it up to full capacity when they built it.
They had it was much lower. We added the addition 4, 5, 6 years ago, aerospace, but it was mostly CTE. A lot of the space was CTE. So it did not add what you would call core capacity like a lot of the other schools. So it's still square footage wise smaller than Stewart's Creek and probably closer to Rockvale. So it does have a smaller capacity based on the programs that are at that particular school.
I think that's something good for the community to realize is even the schools we've opened over the years have had rooms cut from them because of funding. And so while Stewart's Creek, Siegel, and Rockvale have the same footprint, they all were not built at the same time or the same way, which is very unfortunate to have the same design without the same number of buildings. Did I hit that, Trey? Is that correct?
That's a good politically correct answer.
Y'all are going to wish I stayed at home. To me, and I've talked about this before, we're kind of piecemealing this because they know that we need schools. The people that are in this neighborhood that drive this area, they know that the growth is here. But one thing, like Ms. Darby said, that we're not taking into consideration, because I talked about a comprehensive plan, because our house is on fire, and somebody needs to pull the fire alarm. We need funding for schools. We need funding for deferred maintenance. And we've got to somehow put in a plan for our old schools that need to be taken offline. And so we've got good plans. Trey's got good 5-year plans, but we have to get a comprehensive plan together. We can't continue like going to our parents and asking that we want to play the band. Will you fund the band? We want to do track. Will you do the track? We have to get a comprehensive plan and go to our county commissioners and tell them what the real picture is. Because this right here is a great start, but it's a third of what our reality really is.
I'll just tie on to the backside of that to say that, this is future projections, a lot of this growth is as well, but I think we're going to grow faster than what's even presented here. So these numbers, looking at like probably even 26, 27, 27, 28, definitely 28, 29, they're all going to be higher than what we're currently being projected, because developers are still asking for permits and building out, and not all of that's going to be able to be caught this early in the game. So I agree with Ms. Sharp, and I also agree what others have echoed here on the board is, our 5-year plan really needs to be a 2-year plan. And I still don't know that is going to change these numbers drastically, because we're going to have growth that's not accounted for yet coming in as well. And we, like Dr. Sullivan said, we don't control funding, we don't control growth, we are making do with what we have. Now, I appreciate all this data. I think this data is great to be able to present and just show how real this problem is. You can talk about it and you can tell people about it, but when you show them the data and you say, look, this is how bad it is, it's helpful, and hopefully that'll help change minds.
Not only that, if I may, several of these schools that are over capacity, they're Title I schools. Laverne is a Title I school. And we run the risk of the feds coming in and not being so nice to us when we have overcrowding at our Title I schools. So.
Madam Chairman, so one thing I think that is unfortunate, and I brought this up in some conversations on Friday, I think the worst thing that happened, that the board had to choose between which additions. I'm having to prioritize which students that we want to support is something that we should never do. So I got asked on Friday, will the board prioritize, do you want land, do you want an elementary school, or do you want a Laverne addition? And I said, if we're asked to do that, my recommendation to the board is to, no matter how many times you ask, send all three right back to you.
Absolutely.
So just know that that conversation is already started, and that doesn't even include the middle and the high school, which is very unfortunate.
But that's why we need to give them the full picture and not here, because we used to could do that. We can no longer just say, next year we need funding for this. We have to show them the entire picture.
I will say, Dr. Sullivan, you're exactly right. We can no longer just come back and say to the county commissioners, we're going to pick one or the other, because all we're doing is pitting one school against each other, and that's not right, because the growth is happening everywhere. Everybody knows it. Yet yesterday, I had a town hall meeting with the county commissioners, and I invited the district with the concerns of rezoning and everything, so that the county commissioners could hear from the parents the stress that's been put on by the growth into our schools. I know that nobody wants their taxes raised. I definitely don't want my property taxes raised, but we need funding. It costs $180 million to build a school. It costs $65 million to build a middle school. It costs $45 million to build a new elementary school. These are real concerns, real needs. We've got a $200 million deferred maintenance, and so we've got to bring, the community needs to also come to the meetings, go to the county commissioners, and start speaking boldly and loudly that we need funding for schools. And no, Dr. Sullivan, as long as I'm on the board, and I'm sure other people are, I will never tell you we're going to rank one over the other. Our needs are, we need land, we need to build, and we need capital money for our maintenance projects, and we need to also renovate our old schools. That's our priority.
You're here.
And I see a lot of parents out there. We do welcome you, and we are glad you're here. I hope some of your questions have been answered. But what Ms. Rosales just said is so right. We need help.
Yeah.
We need help from you. Tell your county commissioners what it is you're wanting to see from us. We can only do so much. We don't have money. We have ideas. We have data. We've done a lot. We have to rezone every time we turn around. Help us. Help us in that. I see you nodding. Thank you. We really would appreciate it. And what Ms. Rosales said is true. Go to county commission meetings. It does help. It does. Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, it took 2 years, 2 years, and getting it passed twice to get them. $156 million is a ton of money, and it's more money than they've ever given for schools. And I thought they were going to choke, but it's a drop in the bucket for what we're going to need going forward. So yes, we need your help.
I always can keep talking, you know that. That
Bob?
no, exactly.
No.
That is everything I was intending to present to you. If there's other questions, that's where we're at this point.
Anyone else have a question on the board?
I would like,
Dr. Sullivan.
yeah, I'd like some direction from the board because I know that our public wants to know as well. This is not a voting item, so we can discuss what we need to discuss. Whether or not, when we are making motions, at least next Tuesday when we're planning to vote, I plan on separating them into 3. So elementary zone, middle zone, and high school zone, because I know there's different opinions on each one. But then also what we need to do on the high school zone. Do we want to present the recommended zone and then the alternative zone? Do you want just one of them? Just want some direction there. I know for me, my recommendation is the alternative high school. Well, that wasn't expected, but.
Thank you so much.
So, and that came from board conversation. So if that's what the board's interested in going with, I think it's just, I hate to say a waste of time, but I don't know that we need to keep talking about the other one if it's not truly for conversation. But I'm open to whatever the board decides. I just want to know what to present and to prepare for.
Comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
my concern is on this high school plan, we are not considering 2 more additions or a new high school. And we've got to do one or the other, if not both.
Need both.
Both.
We need both, yes.
So before I think we can say or vote on a plan, I think we got to calculate that into the plan somehow and show how that's going to affect these maps.
I got a question on that.
Tibble.
If we were able to do that, could we see how that would affect the numbers? Maybe that would be a good data point to give to our county commission and say, look, this is how substantial this change would be. We know there's a cost associated with it, but that's really not a bad idea at all.
I think my concern is that we're at least 2 years away from opening another edition. Funding would not be able to be secured until June because we technically haven't been approved for the elementary school yet, which I hate to say that, but we haven't been. We would not get funding until June at the earliest to be able to send out for bid, so you're probably not till 27 before we could open the new additions. I'd love to have both of them. I just don't know that we can wait to address zoning for that long.
I'm just saying, I don't know that I can vote for any of these maps until we get that plan. I just think we stay where we are until we figure out that plan.
Mr. Young, I'm sorry to disagree with you, sir, but we need to do something now. We need to do it on November 14th, and I too like the alternative high school concept.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm sorry, who?
Yes, Cardi.
That is not my area of town. I am not super familiar with it. I can say that what I heard in regards to the proposed concept versus the alternative was quite a bit of a traffic logistics issue. I have no problem with the alternative map. I would just like to go on record as saying, I think it's crystal clear 100% that we need a new high school. It is very likely we also need an addition. But when we are looking at these numbers and looking at how high beyond the capacity of our buildings they are, I don't know how we get away from the new high school before an addition, because that's going to give more seats. I understand there are politics involved and all kinds of fun things, but at the end of the day, our job is to make the decisions that are best for our students and our district, and to advise on what we need. This is not a want that the school board has. We're not asking to build the Ritz-Carlton of something. Just, this is a need for our county and our students. So I think it's the most responsible thing for us to do is to maybe revisit our 5-year plan, go back to the county commission, and really, as Ms. Sharp stated, put it all out on the table of exactly what is needed and when it is needed. How and when that's funded might need to be discussed and looked at, and a lot of out-of-the-box ideas, I don't know, but I do know what we are tasked with. And we are tasked with letting the county commission know what we need, why we need it, when we need it, and I think it's really the most responsible thing for us to do that. That's just my 2 cents.
So I got
Ms. Sharp.
Thank you. So with the elementary, middle, and the high school, I'm sort of with Mr. Young about not voting on the middle and the high school because of our past kind of track record for Riverdale and for Rockville, where we voted and we overzoned them, and 2 years later, we were shifting everything back. I think it makes sense to go ahead and do the elementary on the north end and bring some more classrooms to Roy Waldron. But I think even if we go with the, even if we would go with the alternative, I don't have a problem with that. I think we need to wait because we're growing so much. I think we need to wait at least a year to vote on what we're going to do with the middle and the high school because, like Mr. Young said, we're 3 or 4 years down the road of having the numbers and having the funding for this. And I think there's so much growth going on. If we put the zoning in there now and we stick to that, we may overzone like we did at Riverdale and like we did at Rockville. So that's just my, that's just my 2 thoughts.
Thank you.
I think,
Dr. Sullivan.
I just want to remind the board, I would love to go and ask for all the funding, but we have promised them we would fill our additions. If we don't fill our additions with zoning, to me, that's a non-starter from our county commission is you asked for $156 million, you didn't rezone kids to your 3 additions, and now you're asking for another high school. So that, I would love to wait, but to me, if I'm them, you just got 156 million. Why am I giving you anything else when you're not using the seat?
Madam Chair.
Madam Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I have to agree with Dr. Sullivan. We worked very, very hard to secure this fund. And we need a high school, and we need it like tomorrow. And as God is my witness, we're going to work all speed ahead to open up a high school in the next 5 years. We're going to find the land, we're going to build the high school, but we've got to fulfill our obligation and rezone and get kids in the seats that we have.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Couple of questions. How quickly could we get an idea of, if we were to put a high school in that general area, how that changes what that looks like?
Good question, and I think it comes to when the building would open up. So our projections go out to 28, 29. It would be that year at the earliest. So we could frame something, because really what you're saying, it makes sense. If you know there's relief that's going to happen, can you plan for the relief? But with everything you're talking about, I don't think you can wait for the relief. But we could try to create, because I think we're down to maybe 2 locations that we think are primarily where that would be. I know we've started some initial thoughts, which is why I'm saying that I think the alternative plan kind of positions us where we shouldn't have to look to the east side. We should be looking in the Laverne, Smyrna area, Stewart's Creek, how that is impacted. Right, and there may be a 4th that's added to it as we try to balance enrollment, because we don't want to open up one building or have one building too small and the others super large, right? That gets into some challenges.
I think another thing, I don't know what's involved, Dr. Sullivan. I don't know the super specific details of our contract, but is it possible to tentatively approve these rezonings, take another look the year before the additions open, and make sure it's still tracking in the direction it was expected to have the formal and final vote?
Yes.
So that this gives everybody a good idea of where we're looking and what we're planning on, but we can also set it up to be revisited a little closer to those additions opening, making sure everything still looks how it's expected.
Yes, I like that idea. Again, elementary, I would think to go ahead. Elementary, with that school hopefully getting funding, we need to move on that, because I have to start looking at moving budgetary positions, moving all of those. High school has some of that, as long as we're to this, if the 3 additions come online in August of 2026, as long as we know, and we have a school board election in the middle of that as well, this would need to be approved in November of 24 for us to be able to open it, because it is very budget heavy for opening those 3 high school additions. And if we wait into January, it is like when we did the grandfathering portion, and I always support grandfathering seniors. I think we all do when we talk about that. But when we're looking at if you grandfather more than seniors, now I have to leave enough Spanish teachers at both schools to cover your junior and your senior class. So it becomes very much a budget priority when we have to look at it and past that. But to answer your question, yes, absolutely.
Katie, would you please repeat what you just said? What's your idea again?
Well, it was just kind of spurred off of what Mr. Young said. Just tentatively, I'm fine with approving the elementary school, because we are hopeful that that funding is coming through and that's getting done. Taking the middle school and the high school, tentatively approving them with a revisit as close as we can get to before the additions open in an appropriate enough time to do whatever needs to be done to make sure everything is tracking the way that they have projected and expected it to before a firm and final vote.
So that would go like in the motion before we did anything.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I'd like to add to that you're going to have a new board. I think the new board needs to have input in this.
Oh, so do I.
Chicken.
As long as,
Board is going to have input, then why are we going to be voting for it? and wait for it. If
We
you
need to do something now,
Go to
Ms.
the
Rosales. I'm
second
sorry.
part.
We need to do something now. We need to be looking at open seats, right?
But
Any
it's
open
100% agree.
seats?
because-
100, yes,
But
you will have a chance to redo this because you'll still be here.
I know, but I know, I will be, I know, but I'm saying if we're gonna have a new board, I guess I just don't understand the logic of saying it's tentative to have the other board come in. And if
Because-
that's the case, then we should delay the vote.
I think our families need to know. They need to know
think so, too.
what we're thinking and that where we're logic.
We did give them that. They looked at the concepts and they saw it.
But they don't know which one we've approved. If we tentatively approve, say, the alternative, I actually like the alternative. If we tentatively approve this,
Say it again.
I am
We like the alternative.
alternative. But that parents need to know that they live in these areas and they're looking to be rezoned, that they kind of know that's on the horizon. And we can go back, and if things aren't lining up, we can maybe do something different, but at least they know that this is where our heads are. This is what we're thinking.
Yes,
It will be on the next board.
yes,
Agreement with tentative.
Madam Chair,
yes, Mr. Tibble.
I think it's also important, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said about the high school, like the idea. Of course, we all know about the alternative plan here, but the middle school, I think it's really important to note, based off what Dr. Sullivan just said, that the county commission is telling us land, elementary, and an addition.
Pick.
This whole plan is including a new middle school.
Correct.
These numbers are not even remotely close to what they're being projected if we don't have the middle school.
Without a middle school, my only recommendation is to purchase dozens and dozens of portables.
Which is leads to a follow-up question. All these plans are years away.
Correct.
So in the meantime, will we be purchasing more portables for the upcoming year?
Probably.
I mean, what's the other solution? If these are all being postponed and we see, I mean, we don't even have open enrollment at Stewart's Creek Elementary.
Correct.
So in order to satisfy the oncoming growth that clearly is not stopping, then we will be talking about portables, and that's probably a conversation we need to have sooner than later if we need them for this upcoming year.
Probably in January. It will be. It's when we did it last year. And that's the unfortunate part. You bring up a great point. That's the unfortunate part about us not opening any additions or schools. We used to be able to open additions and schools when we were building them every year, so we had portables that we were able to repurpose. With us being on a 5-year hiatus of opening a new school, we don't have any new ones coming available. I don't see a way that we don't have new portables at Riverdale next year. We are losing the senior grandfather class. This is the last class that could be grandfathered from Rockville to Riverdale. We'll need them there. I don't see how we don't need them at Smyrna and Laverne as well, and probably Stewart's Creek High School. So, totally agree with you.
I certainly think that's something that we should be looking into sooner than later so we can have that plan ready in January.
Anyone else? So, Dr. Sullivan, what else would you like for us to do?
I think we're good.
We're good?
Yep. I think the only thing I would ask is I do have one thing. When we get to the motion, I do think it's important that we try to set maybe a November or December tentative for next year, because I know that's going to be a lot for new board members to come in and hit that ground running, but we have to. We can't delay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Do you want to take a recess? Or
Yeah, you want to take a little break?
a 5-minute recess?
We're going to take a 10-minute break, folks. Everybody needs to go to the restroom and do some things, so give us just a minute. 7:18.
you. We don't need to wait.
No.
7:18, so I'll return to the table.
We didn't get a warning.
I'm freezing.
We lost some people. Number 9.
You got number 8 still.
Are we still at number 8?
So just a reminder,
Oh, sorry.
with number 8, we'll
Sorry.
have REA president has requested Dr. Katisa Nichols and teacher Sienna Hall to discuss and answer questions regarding the PECA MOU. I haven't been involved in that at all because I'm not sure that, because that is set up in state law with collaborative conferencing. Both the central office team and REA came up to an agreement, so I'm not in a position to ask them to change any wording of anything, so they'll be here to answer any questions. And outside of that, I don't know if there's anything specific a board member wants them to address. I don't know what to tell them, but they also haven't asked, so. That gets us to number 9, which is connected.
Number 9.
There we go. Memorandum of Understanding with professional educators, the Board of Education Management Team of Professional Educators of Rutherford County, represented by the Rutherford County Education Association, in the collaborative process has reached an agreement as presented in the Memorandum of Understanding.
The questions, challenges, concerns? Next.
The Teach Now Mentor Stipend. Teach Now Department would like to allocate $13,200 of general purpose funds to support 79 Rutherford Teach Now mentors. The purpose of this mentorship is to provide building level support for Teach Now participants. These mentors are responsible for completing all training, meetings, and reflections. As a reminder, this can tell you how many teachers we have going through our own licensure program. So that is what they are supporting, which is a huge success for Rutherford County. The state has kind of shut that down a little bit, and so we are still our own licensing agreement. Mr. Darby and I talked about a possibility of that a little bit while ago, but still very thrilled with how that's going and the number of teachers we're putting into classrooms.
Could I ask you why the state has shut that down?
Not necessarily shut it down. We have some new roadblocks with accreditation. So in order for us to be able to add new programs, we have to get new accreditation. And so there's a lack of other districts, and you also have your local universities who control teacher licensure. And so any type of competition sometimes is a struggle for traditional licensure. It's a very nice professional way of me
That
putting
was a
that.
very professional way of putting that.
But I would love to add more programs to our Teach Now.
Anyone? Questions? Number 10.
Number 10, so out-of-county transfer, and so the board's been requested to admit a transfer student from another school system under discipline. Student is remanded to alternative school for disruptive behavior. According to policy 6.318, the board may deny admission of any student except those in state custody when a student transfers from another school system while under suspension or expulsion. Director of School's recommendation in this setting is to admit and place into alternative school. Our alternative school numbers are okay at this point with looking at this student's history as well, admit and place into alternative school.
And you have your packet that's been sent to you in case you need to read it, or there's a packet in front of you. Number 2.
Number 2 is a little different. We haven't had one of these in quite a while. So a discipline hearing appeal. This is number 23-1101. The board's been requested to review a decision of the Discipline Hearing Authority, DHA, to uphold the expulsion of a student from Rocky Fork Middle School. As required by policy, the Director of Schools has also reviewed the expulsion and upheld the decision of the DHA. Based on a review of the DHA's record, the board may, and I would just call out, there's actually only 2 things you can do in this one. It is a zero tolerance offense, so you can affirm the decision of the DHA, or you can grant a hearing before the board, and if you grant a hearing before the board, then all options are available to you at that point. But one of the 2 has to happen, and since this is just an appeal, there is no presentation unless the parent wanted to sign up as a 3-minute visitor. If they wanted to talk, then that would come before the full hearing.
Questions or comments? Number 11, special education.
Special Education Department would like to recognize the school psychologist. National School Psychology Week is this week, November 6th through 10th. School psychologists partner with families, teachers, school administrators, and other professionals to create safe, healthy, and supportive learning environments that strengthen connections between home, school, and the community. They apply expertise in mental health, learning, and behavior to help children and youth succeed socially, behaviorally, emotionally, and academically. They're also important members of school safety and crisis teams. And so if you're looking at that one, Dr. Chastain, you may know, I believe every one of our school psychologists or Dr. Ralston are in special education. Is that correct? I thought so. Yep. Which is doing initial testing, all different types of things for special education. So when you hear psychologist, the first time I did, I thought it was someone like my wife, a mental health counselor. It is not. They're the ones involved in our special education settings.
Questions? Next.
State Special Education Preschool Grant is a new grant opportunity this year for the Tennessee Department of Education. The funds will be used for additional education assistant positions to assist in the pre-K classrooms and additional training for the teachers and education assistants. Rutherford County Schools has 22 integrated preschool classes across the district that serve over 300 students. The monies afforded to us by this grant will ensure that students have access to highly trained teachers and staff to meet their educational needs.
Comments, questions?
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes, sir.
I have a question about this. If we were to accept the grant, then is it an annual thing?
We apply every year.
Okay, great.
Integrated preschool is the most wonderful program on the face of the earth. I've had 2 grandchildren in it, and it does so much for these kids. Annie, you want to tell them what they do? Want to tell them? They work with special needs students. Sorry, Annie.
And while you're coming up, would you also hit on that it's just, it's a requirement at APR from the state for us to have some of these programs?
Yeah, it is. So integrated preschool is a required from the state. We have 22 different programs across our district right now. We serve lots of students with disabilities. We go through a screening process and a testing process throughout the year. So every time a student comes in, and they are 3 and they have a disability, they're automatically enrolled in our pre-K program, and we serve them and we love them and we help them grow. We have some typical peers in there as well, so they get to be in an inclusive setting. We have lots of 50-50 split classes this year. This is our first year to have that, and those are flourishing, and so we can't wait to see what happens next year. With this grant, it is coming every year. This is new, but they did say they're going to re-up it every year, and so we can continue to offer these supports to our students. This grant totals at $429,168.35. 35 cents is important.
Yes. Anyone have a question?
What's the numbers again? I'm sorry. Sorry, Madam Chair.
It's fine.
The dollar amount? Yes, ma'am. $429,168.35. Okay. Let me stay right here for the next one.
Yeah. And it is different than our voluntary pre-K, which is also state funded, but is not a requirement. Yep.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the volunteer pre-K, though, is not 100% state funded, correct?
Correct. We do have some costs because of just how much they support at the state level for what we have to pay for salaries.
Okay, just want to make sure.
And classroom space, which is probably the bigger cost.
Do we get a federal grant for that as well? For
No.
volunteer, just state?
Just state. Now, where the state gets it from, I have absolutely no clue, but for us, it's the state.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next.
Next, Rutherford County Schools contract with High Road School in Nashville. High Road School is a non-public private special education school in Tennessee. This contract will allow Rutherford County Schools to place certain students who meet High Road's qualifications in their school to continue their education. Rutherford County will pay the tuition and related fees for students who are placed there throughout the student's individualized education program meeting.
Questions?
Yes, could I ask, what ages are the children and how many, by chance, on a year basis do we send?
So we have not sent any to High Roads yet in the past year that I've been here. And so this is a new contract. We had a contract a while ago, and then that went kaput. And so now we are going to start a new contract with them just to give us some more options for our students to make sure that they're receiving the services they need.
Is this K through 12 or?
It is.
Okay.
Anyone else have a question for Dr. Ralston? Thank you, Dr. Ralston. Number 12, curriculum and instruction.
So kind of connected curriculum instruction, I haven't talked to Dr. Ralston about this yet, but part of that zoning discussion is the ability to bring Roy Waldron Annex offline. So what we're looking at for the Roy Waldron Annex is to be able to make that more of a specialized setting for some students who have some specialized needs. And then the other portion of that is we tried to not go down the elementary alternative school route, but we're to the point now we need an alternate placement for some students. I hate to admit it, but we need an alternate placement. And so we have multiple avenues that we could use. The school set up in multiple wings, and so you'll hear us start talking about that and asking for board approval and board direction. One of those that'll happen pretty quick, and it'll get to be you, Ms. Sharp. You'll get to be involved in naming the school. So congratulations. So
Sharp Springs? No.
very well done. Very well done.
Tammy Academy.
Yeah. So just know that'll start happening, and we'll talk to our principals about that. You hate to say that you need it, but we need it. The one thing we cannot do, and it's outlined in state laws, we cannot have kindergarten students in there. It is only for 1st through 5th grade for us. No kindergartners, which kindergarten is some of our most explosive behavior right now. So won't be able to solve some of that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Curriculum and instruction.
All right, so the placeholder, we have proposed graduation calendar for 2024. It was released, but it needs to be approved by the board. It was posted on October 20th to our website for planning purposes. We are hoping to have MTSU's contract to you by Thursday. I cannot promise that we have it, and if we don't have it, we'll pull it. But I'll probably will ask just to go ahead and approve the dates just so we can have that done and finalized. Working with MTSU is sometimes very slow on contracts. Is that a nice way of putting that, Dr. Martin? Okay.
Thank you for all the work you've done, Dr. Martin, on this. I know you've worked on it tirelessly for quite a while. Charter school agreement?
So charter school agreement with American Classical Education Tennessee. Charter agreement's been worked out between the staff of Rutherford County School System, American Classical Education Tennessee, and Board Attorney Jeff Reed. Pursuant to state law, the term of the agreement is for 10 years. And that's I believe, that is a tab in this one. Do we have that already attached, Dawn? I haven't looked at the tabs. Okay, perfect.
Questions? Number 13, engineering and construction.
First one, request for Blackman Middle Baseball. Principal Jessica Jackson is requesting to install a synthetic turf home plate area for baseball. The cost for this project is not to exceed $10,000 and is to be funded through the baseball account. Engineering and construction reviewed the request and recommends approval.
Questions or concerns?
Ms. Breton?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to say that I spoke with Dr. Jackson today, and she's really excited about getting the turf on the baseball field. So I just want to share that with everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Number 2.
Request for Eagleville High School. Principal Tim Pettigo is requested to complete the baseball softball hitting facility restroom project. The cost for the plumbing work is not to exceed $8,600 and be funded by school baseball account funds. Engineering Construction has reviewed the request and recommends approval.
Questions? Comments? Number 3.
And request to pursue looking for land to build, rent, or lease property. And so what I would just kind of like, and I'll probably reword this, is just permission to begin looking at Smyrna Middle School and Whitworth Buchanan as locations. And then we'll bring, once architects are done, all that to start looking at design and building. There was an article today that's connected to this about MTSU and some of the properties that they lease out to people. I can't confirm it right now, but I am pretty sure one of those is what we lease as well with the Transition Academy. So not going to discuss that any further. It wouldn't involve us, but definitely involves MTSU.
Okay.
Definitely involves the taxpayers.
Definitely involves the taxpayers as well.
Yes.
$12 million.
Yep.
Yeah.
Insurance update?
We'll be meeting this Thursday with Ed Elam and his team on the OGI review for the upcoming year.
Post-65 retirees have received their packets and their letters, so thank you very much.
And I'll say on the insurance update, I've received several questions from various county commissioners about whether or not we have funding to be able to pay for the insurance that the board approved. So I just want to let you know that we will work to make sure that we have that. That is part of our job as our staff is to make sure, but that's been out in the world of conversation, and so I wanted to make sure that I let you all know that we plan to take care of that.
So if anybody asks, you say, yes, we have the funding. Number 15, financial report.
Nothing tonight,
Okay,
other than what I just hit on.
it's pretty good.
Yes.
Number 16, director's update.
Yeah, so just as a heads up, the resolution regarding suspended driver's license for making threats was mailed to our state reps and senators on November 3rd. Resolution requiring lockdown training for substitute teachers went to TSBA on November 1st to be shared during the delegation assembly at the TSBA annual conference. Is there anything you wanted to hit on that? Because I think
Yes,
it's different.
there is. This resolution did not reach them in time to be added to the program, but they can bring it up. And so
Does it have
we
to be
can,
60 days? It was early.
yeah, it's really early.
They print really, really early.
Yeah,
and-
they do,
and
but-
Mr. Torres told me he could do both of them.
Oh, now that, I haven't gotten in notification on the other one. I've only gotten notification on the substitute teachers one, so maybe they'll be sending that.
When I spoke with
Well, they need to hurry, because,
previously, yeah, when I,
yeah, we're going to be there next week, right?
Yeah.
So
well, he said they would just print.
maybe they'll just print
a
it,
supplement.
but they have not notified me for that, okay? So that's all I know, but it will not be in the program, so to speak. So, there you go.
Other thing I want to hit on is I want to thank our teachers and building testing administrators. So we're in the middle of benchmark testing right now, which we do benchmark testing a couple times a year just to get a target of where our students are on performance. And so that requires a lot of work, all of it online. And so there's a lot of logistics that go in. So thank you as well. It's strange today. I walked into the virtual school and there were students in the virtual school and it just threw me off for a minute. I was confused on why there were students in the virtual school, but they were testing in person to make sure we had testing security. That's all we got.
Questions? All right, Ms. Rosales, you have something for us that I asked you to report out on today. So, are you ready?
I am ready, if they're ready for the, okay, so I've been doing a lot of things, lately, meeting with our, state legislators as a federal and state liaison. So currently, the House and the Senate has been tasked with reviewing and looking into, what it will imply rejecting federal funds. So I put together a little presentation that solely speaks on Rutherford County schools as a district of what the federal funds means to us and how it's been applied and used. This presentation has been sent to all the members of our Rutherford County delegation and also to the members that are sitting in the review committee in the House and the review committee for the Senate as well. Don White is our senator that is on the Senate side, that's on the review committee. Okay, so I'm going to skip that. It's just pretty much just an introduction to that, but we can skip that, that slide and go to the next one. So down here, I got this data with the help of Mark Goulion, who's not here, and also input from Dr. Sullivan, and I even ran it by Dr. Martin as I was leaving. So few people, there were people here from the central office that look into it. So this is pretty much, this came from not Mark, but from Brian. Brian gave us this line-by-line item, and Mark told me to use for the ones that were in 2024. So I used the 2024 numbers, and that's at $21,610,771. This does not include USDA reimbursement, which is a total separate line item, and you'll be shocked to know how much money we get from that. So this is all of our Title I money and CTE, IDE, this is a special education and all that good jazz. So if you want to change it to the next slide, that will be pretty much the amount that will be that the state will have to come up with to give to Rutherford County minus USDA reimbursement. So, go ahead.
No, I just was going, oh gosh.
Yeah, it's $21 million, $21.6 million. So down here is just a short condensed summary of some of those numbers for the different title, federal grants that we get. And at the bottom, you will see that this is a total of $18.5 million federal dollars. This does not include an additional $14 million from the USDA for meal reimbursements. That's the forms that we get for the free and reduced, and why we've been getting so much emphasis on that. So if you want to change it to the next slide. So what I did is I broke it down by the big buckets of our federal grants and kind of talked about what those implications are if they reject it. And so for Title 1A, that will put a huge strain on our general budget because it primarily funds at least 53 positions in 12 schools that are funded. You're looking at instructional coaches, interventionists, EAs. It'll be hard to have parent community engagement because that's part of the funding that's required. This is mostly where the Title I funds that schools get, where the technology and resources, where we're able to provide one-to-one student ratio. And also, this is also a fund that goes into developing our own teachers and develop them, as to be in their careers. So you're looking at this fund alone is at $6,221,915.16. I didn't even round it because I just wanted them to know all the way to the cent. So go ahead and change to the next one, please. So this one is for the SPED, IDEA. It's a little bit bigger fund. This will have the most significant impact on staffing positions. And so this is something that needed to be stated and really made clear. Even if we were to reject the federal funds, we will still be required by law to follow these federal laws. So either way, we have to follow the laws, especially when it pertains to SPED, which is our special education. And so that fund is at $10,146,115. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied. So if you want to go to the next slide. If we were to reject Title II funds, this will completely eliminate all the funding that is used towards professional development and teacher positions. And it just really puts a burden in the sense that this is how we incentivize some of our teachers to take on a leadership role that they're pursuing by becoming a curriculum lead. And so this fund helps aiding that and really incentivizing teachers to kind of be promoted and getting a sense of promotion and hones their leadership skills a little bit more. So the Title II funds, we're looking at $1,170,449.15. So the next slide is if we were to reject Title III funds, this is the fund that really speaks to our special populations. That's our English learners. So it will create a huge domino effect because we won't be able to provide translation services. There will be curriculum development specific towards them, and obviously it will hugely impact their staffing positions. And right now, with the current rate of growth that we are experiencing in the county, we're seeing this year alone 7,000 students come in this year and continues to grow. And even though it's a small fund, but it's still quite significant, and that's $750,474.85. So then the last one is the Title IV. This is considered the Well-Rounded, Safe, and Healthy Fund. And basically, this fund is just for programs that are tailored specifically towards bullying and the overall physical health being of the students. So that fund is about $451,698.39. So here's the biggest thing that will impact greatly will be the USDA reimbursement because it's at $14 million. And, we as a district are trying really hard to reduce the burden of bad meal debt. And this is where that funding will come from, is that right there. Even though we've done a good job of trying to decrease it by 10% year over year, we still need to work more to put even more of a dent on the bad meal debt. So the last slide pretty much just puts it all together and really answers the questions about if we are going to do this, is it a sustainable model? Can we sustain rejecting the federal dollars every year? And if for whatever happens, for whatever reason, and we hit a recession and the economics are not there, how we're going to pay for that? And to give you a bigger picture, I was quoted by a state senator that it's $1.6 billion funds that we will have to take in. I will say that this is something that's driven more by the House than it is by the Senate. I've been told that we're putting the cart before the horse, but regardless, I just wanted them to have this information, and I specifically did this so that they can have it right as they were getting ready to start those conversations.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Could you send that to us? Do you have?
To you and to Dr. Sullivan,
I
but I'll
must
send it
have-
to everybody. No,
Okay, I'm sorry, I was probably answering the 492
I'm
emails
sure
I got this
you
weekend.
got a lot of
Yeah.
emails.
Yeah, but you did send it, because I would like to have a copy of this.
Absolutely. I sent it to you.
I think that's got some good points on it, in case somebody asks us, why is this important? What is it going to do if we get rid of federal funds? So this helps. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me share that.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, it was my understanding that they are looking at this, but they were going to supplement. So they are looking at coming out from underneath the federal government, because as
We're going to supplement the $16 billion.
that's what I'm hearing.
Well, goodness gracious.
That's what I'm hearing. So,
That's
because we know
just marvelous.
we got to have all the bean counters for this job and that job, and yeah. So,
Some of our bean counters, you're like, really?
coffee, beans, because we can go, Mr. Young speaks about it quite often, the unfunded mandates that we are underneath. So I would really like to look at this, and if they're going to supplement us for what we've lost, I'd like to see.
Okay, thank you.
What they would say.
I appreciate that. Anyone else?
You really don't, but it's okay.
It's okay. I love you anyway, but hey, whatever. Anyone else?
I would.
Okay, Dr.
My
Sullivan?
concern would just be we still have to follow federal law, so that's my only, if they can somehow figure out we don't have to follow that, but I think that's my concern, is that they talk about it, but then I still think we're gonna have to follow the law, so I hope it's not just a conversation for.
Which could become an unfunded mandate.
I know they've been talking about it for a long time.
Anyone else?
Thank you guys for your work tonight. I know it wasn't fun or comfortable, but
No, that
we just keep doing this, don't we? We just keep doing it.
And this is the place to have them.
That's right.
Ms. Darby?
Are we in general discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to Rock Springs Elementary. They invited me to the amazing shake today. So I know Mr. Tidwell spoke about it last year, and I got to spend the day with some awesome fifth graders today. It's a really cool program, so thank you for bringing it up last year and talking about it, Mr. Tidwell, and thank you to Rock Springs Elementary for allowing me to participate today.
I think Mr. Tidwell's you're gonna see about getting them to come and do some demonstrations or something of that. Sometimes.
Yes, that is the plan. We'd love to have some emphasis shown on some of the awesome programs that we have here at RCS, and Amazing Shake is one of my favorite ones. I will be a judge at Buchanan later this month, and if you guys have not been a part of the program, it is awesome.
So fun. Awesome. Anyone else?
I'd like to go to Atlanta.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
Move to adjourn.
You're adjourned.